Hi everybody, my name is Mark, I'm an alcoholic. So apparently the joke that I told last week that didn't get any laughs has sent a few people running because it seems to be a little sparse today, a little sparse. So I'm going to repeat the joke just to get it out of the way in case you didn't get offended last week. So the first sentence in the 12 and 12 in regards to step 6 says, "This is the step that separates the men from the boys." So says a noted clergyman who is a good friend of AA. And I was once doing a lecture, and I asked the question, so what separates the men from the boys? And the guy in the back row just went, "Pews." And that was it. And that was the whole joke. And so apparently if somebody took offense to that last week, so they're not here, which means whatever. Huh? It was pretty funny. All right, Michelle, maybe you're going to have to talk later. I'm thinking it's pretty funny. I do have a note, a Post-it note that was handed to me, written in Sharpie, so that means it must be important. And apparently, the first 4 steps in this amazing series by this incredibly humble and adroit speaker named Rabbi Mark is now available for download at SoberTodayClub.com. Yes. Listen, if you already heard it, don't listen again. It's annoying. I've got that weird kind of a voice. So let's talk about step 6. Because step 6 is my favorite step. And what makes it my favorite step is that it is... See, a lot of times I like to read the table of contents in the 12 and 12 because it pulls these like random just things out, you know, of the step or whatever written, just book stuff, right? And it says that it is a lifetime, the beginning of a lifetime journey. And I have done the steps formally on numerous occasions. My sponsor, God bless him, he was a bit of a jerk-off and kind of an angry man, but it's really what I needed. This was my first sponsor that really took me through the work, and he took me through the work with him twice. The first time was somewhat rapidly, the second time was more in depth, and then the third time asked for me to be a sponsor, and then he said, "I will always be your sponsor," which was a lie, because when I moved from California to Pennsylvania, I kept calling him 3 or 4 times a week, and he kept saying, "Get a new sponsor, goddammit, you're annoying me." And I said, "But you lied to me, you told me." Long story short, his suggestion was that every year, give or take, I should ask someone else who I respected, who I thought had a certain je ne sais quoi on a spiritual level, to formally take me through the steps. And in doing so, I've been through them about 14 times formally. Well, 14 different people. More times than 14, but just working them formally with 14 different people. And basically what I've done is I've compiled this sort of like, I don't know, I guess it's like, you guys know who Bruce Lee was? So Bruce Lee, he had this martial arts. His student was this guy, Danny Inosanto, that after Bruce died, he took over his dojo in Venice Beach. And he taught this martial art called Jeet Kune Do, right? Which was basically the best part out of every martial art. He's like, why waste time learning 50,000 katas? Just learn how to punch a dude in the throat and just handle your business. And that's what it's about. And that's in essence what I kind of do with the steps. I've like pilfered and plagiarized and stolen everything I've ever learned in my entire life. But like I say every week, I don't steal from idiots anymore. Now that I'm sober, I steal from smart people. And I use that. We were talking about it earlier. I actually don't approach every guy I sponsor the same way. It depends whether they've been through the steps before, if they have time, if they don't. And I try to customize based on knowing them, and my experience also as a professional in the therapeutic realm is trying to figure out what they need and just trying to, I like to hit people where they're at. So apparently the people that got offended at the joke last week, fuck them, because they're not here. So that's where they're at. And my feelings are hurt. I just have to say it. So this is the problem with step 6, is I have been through the steps before with people that say, oh yeah, 6 and 7, and we get done, we do the 5th step, and we talked about that 5th step last week, and remember I said it was thin, but I spoke for almost an hour on it, because there is quite a bit in there, even though it's not, and really the main idea, right? What's the main idea of the 5th step, that simple step, is the exact nature of my wrongs, right? I can't get into 6, which is to be willing to have God remove these defects, which I now become aware of because of good feedback from the person that I read it to, that has experience and has his own experience, and he has shown me through the enlightenment, the process, specifically the turnaround in the 4th column of the 4th step, where I have allowed fear to drive my behaviors, and those behaviors have reinforced the fears, because that's what happens. Fear is not real until I overcompensate. That overcompensation is a failure. That failure makes that fear real, right? And that has dictated my life until I got sober. And until someone with a certain amount of sophistication could show me that, I was unable to move into the 6th step. And so I've had people that said, oh yeah, it's super short, you got your 5th step, you're good, we'll spend 10 minutes, we'll do 6 and 7, we'll handle your business, and I don't even want to jump ahead, but 7 is a whole nother ball game, and that's next week, and I'm really dreading that, because my belief is the minute you start talking about humility, you lose all the humility you have, so I just may show up and show a slide or something, like, and do point. Maybe I can get like a PowerPoint and go like, well, somebody said this, it's not me, but somebody else did. So, what's the problem with step 6? Well, there's literally one sentence in the entire big book that explains and delineates the process of the step. One, right? And what do you think it is? Anybody? I'll give you a hint. It's on page 76. Anybody?
Be willing.
Be willing. That's what everybody says. Yeah, you're wrong. So let me refrain that. No. See, everybody says that. Are we entirely ready? Are we willing? And it says that. It says we emphasize willing as being indispensable. But if you've ever, humble 7, don't jump ahead. But you see, willingness is indispensable, but willingness is indispensable for every single step. And if you read Appendix 2, the Spiritual Experience, at the very end, on page 568, it says, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. These are indispensable, right? They are really indispensable for every step. And willingness is reiterated over and over and over in the book as being an integral part of doing the work. So it's not the willingness. Willingness is important, and you should have that willingness, but it's not necessarily the key to the step. It's the next sentence. And this is the one that's baffling, and this is why people rush through it. Which is weird because there are numerous books, like entire books written about steps 6 and 7. My favorite one's Drop the Rock, and its second version, which is Ripples. There's 2 books by Hazelden just about steps 6 and 7, and they're both profound. This is the sentence. Page 76, if you have your book and you want to read it, it's this. It's very simple. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things that we now admit are objectionable? Right? That is the entire premise of the whole step. So what does that mean? Again, just look at the step. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So before I get into talking about that, let's talk about defects. Okay? Because there's something that needs to be said, in essence, about defects. And I think we have to talk about defects versus shortcomings. Now, granted, Bill himself, in both Language of the Heart and AA Comes of Age, has said specifically that the only reason he used 2 different words for step 6 and 7 is because he didn't want to look like a ding-dong. Okay? But we all know that a drunken proctologist and a stock swindler from New York got together and probably composed the single most spiritually accessible, user-friendly tome of the 20th century. They didn't do it because they were erudite scholars at the pinnacle of their studies. They did it because they were tools. They were giant tools. Like me, I'm a tool. Hopefully I'm a tool of God, right? Not like one from the Jersey Shore. But you know what I mean, right? But that's it. They were in essence tools. And if you believe, as I do, that there is in fact divine conspiracy at work and manifest in the production of this book, that things that were written on the spur of the moment and debated for months and months and months. Listen, it's 164 pages of basic text. It took 3 years to write. A blind monkey with one finger typing like this could write 164 pages in 3 years. That's one page every 5 days. Literally. Anybody could write that. It wasn't the writing, it was the arguing over it. So funny, we were looking at it outside. We were looking at the book that started it all. What does it say after the ABCs that we read every single day at every single meeting? In the original galley it says, if we have not convinced you of these 3 vital points, please reread the book up until this point, or else throw it away. Right? They took that out of the galley when they did the final episode. Got Netflix on my mind. What do you want? So there's all this stuff, right? So it took a lot of debate, and really the argument and the dialogue and the frustration. You got to understand, Bill had 5 years, Bob had 4 years. They had no sponsors. It was the blind leading the freaking blind. And then you had Bill Dodson from Cleveland talking mad shit, like you got you know. But listen, it is what it is. That this was the cauldron, right? The melting pot that this kind of philosophy came out of, right? And that's the beauty of it, right? The beauty of it that it's a truly philosophical text. So we have to understand that even though Bill himself says there's no difference, there is in fact a difference. Because there is a difference between a defect and a shortcoming. And let me give you an analogy. So really when I do step 5, and if I do it right, with someone that is a adroit guide that helps me out and really helps me to understand my true nature within that, it is nearly impossible for me to possess defects. Because defects inherently fall under 2 categories. Broken beyond repair is the first category. Remember, like 4 or 5 years ago, the Toyota 4Runners, like the pedal would stick and they were like mowing down people at the farmer's market, right? That's a defect. You can't fix it. You got to send it back and replace it. There's a recall. So it's a defect, means it's broken beyond repair. I hope and believe and pray that I do not possess defects like that, right? I don't think God makes shit, right? I think God makes neutrality and I make it shit through my behaviors, right? Which means it's not inherently broken. It's not beyond repair. It's bent. It's bent like twisted, crazy bent. But given the right fire and hammer and an anvil, I may be able to straighten that shit out. Know that. It's going to take some work, but it's not broken. Right? That's the first type of defect. The second type is a type where it remains unknown. Because it cannot be fixed if you are unaware of it. So when I do a 5th step, when I did my 5th step, I became known for those bent problems, right? And when they became known, if I truly desire, which I did, to be a sober man, my goal was not to do that shit again. Which meant that instantly I had the glimpse of those defects for a second, and I moved immediately into the parameters of shortcomings. Because a shortcoming means I come up short. That's it. I'm shooting at the target. I'm aiming for the goal. But I fail because I'm inherently human. What does the Dalai Lama say in Miracles of the 21st Century? He says there are no failures. There are only ways to learn not to succeed, thereby engaging in the process of elimination. Right? That's beautiful, right? That's the idea. So it's like this. My first car was this shitty Datsun 510. Like, it was a piece of junk. It had Bondo in different colors. I had it was a 4-door, which made it even less cool than uncool. And I had the vice grip on the window handle on the passenger side, and you have to flip it like that to roll it down. It ran on 3 cylinders. It sucked. It was horrible. But it had the rain gutter, so I could put a surf rack on there. And when I got that shit, it was the best thing I ever had in my life. I'm like, car dates and bong loads. This is super, right? It was on. It was the best thing. I could go from point A to point B, and nobody could tell me what to do, and I could kiss the girl. So there. It was awesome. It was awesome. That was the best thing ever. It was a giant piece of shit. But I thought it was the best thing ever. About 3 months later, my friend got the exact same car. But he bought it from a woman that drove it the little old lady that takes it 3 miles to church on Sunday, and it still smells like Depends and but it was in pristine shape, right? A horrible color, beige or whatever it was. But he goes, dude, check out my 510. And I'm like, I hate you. And then I drove it. And the second I drove it, the car that I loved a minute prior, I hated. I found it most disgusting, lamest, most junky piece of junk car of anybody I knew, and I was embarrassed to be in it. Because when I was unaware of the faulty nature, I couldn't do anything about it. But the minute I became aware, the onus of correction fell upon me. You understand? That's the beauty. And that's if I don't know, I can remain in defects. But if I do a 5th step correctly, and I become enlightened, I now am obligated by my desire to be a better man, which means I strive for that. Yeah? Which means I can't be in defects. Very simple. I heard it said this way. Defects are doing what you know you're not supposed to do. And shortcomings are not doing enough of what you know you should. All right? I like a simpler, more graphic kind of potty mouth version. Defects are fuck yous, and shortcomings are fuck ups. You understand? And I can get past that. And that's the beauty of step 6. Why is it so complex? It's complex because the minute I become aware of the negativity of it, I now have the desire to get past it and transcend it. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things we now believe are objectionable? If every step is inherently a transactional contract between me and my higher power, which I believe they are, and the entire process itself is an overarching contract for me to grow into the man I can hopefully be, right? Then that means there has to be a division of labor for every one of these steps, correct? Right? So, take step 3. I turn my will in my life. What's my will? What will happen? My fear of the future. What's my life? Everything that has happened. My resentments to the past. I turn that over to the care of God, so God gets to worry. That means my labor is to work, because God doesn't want me to worry, and He sure as shit isn't doing any of the work. That's the division of labor. So what's the division of labor that I have in step 6? Very simple. I have to find it objectionable. That means the behaviors that I consistently did for so long, that were hustles and shady and deviant and conniving, that actually treated me in good stead and kept me alive and kept me from going to the penitentiary and kept me from getting shot again. These things are not really great skill sets that normal people want, but for us, they may be kind of effective, which means that it's hard for me to find the thing that kept me alive objectionable. Right? That's the hardest part. Right? And that's the beauty of it. My job is to find it objectionable. That means If I don't find those behaviors that have caused me drama and shame and pain over a period of time, which is now I know about because of a thorough fourth and fifth step, they're never going anywhere. If I like that shit, it's not going anywhere. That's the bottom line. God will and can remove it. Let's look exactly, right? On when we look at that on page 63 in the 12 and 12, right? What's that first line? It says right there, whether God can and will under certain circumstance remove character defects, right? That's what it is. What is it, page? I think it's page 63. Let me see. I'm pretty sure. There it is. Whether God can, and will, under certain conditions, remove defects of character, will be answered with a prompt affirmative. Hell yeah! As long as you find them bad. If you don't find them bad, they are not going anywhere. You'd be like, my defect, triple snap. She knows what's up, right? So he asks at the beginning, at the very same page, this is the step that separates the men from the boys. And without giving that totally disgusting joke again, I'm going to ask, what separates children from adults? Correct. What else?
Your work.
What'd you say?
Your work, your effort.
Your effort. Your effort.
Your work.
Yeah, I think that's half right. I think that's half right. Because here's the deal. All right. Did anybody in this room play sports as a kid, like T-ball or Little League baseball or something like that? All right. So when you play Little League ball, you go and you bat like 150, 200, and you're like, I'm okay, but I can really be better. So you harangue your dad and annoy the piss out of him to take you to the batting cage every day. Because in your little 7-year-old brain, you're like, I'm going to practice every day. And next season, I'm going to bat 1,000. And I'm going to be MVP. And it's going to be awesome. Because the child believes that he can attain perfection. And does the work, strives, goes to the batting cage every single day. And in the next season, when he strikes out the first 3 games, doesn't get a hit, his spirit is crushed, and he goes, fuck this, I'm not playing baseball anymore. And he storms off. Because the expectation that he can attain that perfection is what crushes his spirit. Go ahead, rebuttal.
I agree, totally. However, that's not what I said. Effort, I think, is profound.
I got it. I just trying to make a point. Stop stepping on me.
I'm sorry. I do that. I'm sorry. For you.
All right, but that's the idea, right? The immature person believes that they can attain whatever corrupted humanistic ideal of perfection they can have, right? Listen, there's a book by a guy named Ernest Kurtz. He wrote a history book of AA. It's called Not God. It's an amazing book. He wrote another book called The Spirituality of Imperfection. Right? He starts off this book with a story about baseball. He says baseball is the single most spiritual game in the universe because it's very human, because errors are part of the scoring system. And if you get that shit right 1 out of 3 times, you go to the Hall of Fame. Trust me, if I had a job making pizzas and I broke the shit out of 2 out of 3 pizzas, I would not have that job. I'm definitely not going to the Pizza Hall of Fame. That's not happening, right? Because it understands the striving for perfection, knowing you will never attain it, but not having that knowledge deter you from the striving. That's what Bill talks about for 7 pages in the 12 and 12, right? How can we accept the entire implication of this step, right? What does it say? This is perfection, right? Page 68. The entire implication of step 6 is perfection. But if I'm human and inherently flawed, then my perfection lies in that flawed reality, right? All I have to do is find those things repugnant, repulsive, reprehensible, and objectionable. and then they go the way they go, right? It's not magic. Let me tell you something. When I find that I am, okay, so this is weird, right? So how do I put this? I may have been known to have a lack of patience and tolerance at times. Maybe, okay? Might be one of my shortcomings. I don't know. We should probably ask my sponsor, Charlie. But, so what do? Well, under good guidance, I pray for patience and tolerance. I do not magically get patience and tolerance. I get stuck behind the school bus at 8 o'clock in the morning on a one-lane street. Every freaking time. Every time. And it's not because the universe conspires to put me behind that school bus. It's because my focus on that shortcoming keeps it in the front of my consciousness where I recognize the impact when it happens. Because if I didn't pray, I'd be behind the school bus, turn up the music going, but now because I'm thinking about it, I recognize that that's where I am lacking. Listen, if you want to get better at playing chess, you don't play with a person you beat all the time. You play with somebody that beats you. You want to hear one of my long-standing resentments that I'll never let go of? It's at my dead dad, and it's over chess. So every day on Saturday, after Shabbos services, we would go home, we would eat lunch, we would learn. My mom would clean up, and my dad would make me learn Talmud for about 2 hours. Now, I don't know how many of you thought that learning Aramaic, a dead language, when you're 7 is a good way to kill time. It's not. It's torturous. And then we would go schluff, which in German means take a nap. And when we woke up, before we went to synagogue again, we would play chess. And not only was the torture of Talmud merciless, but my dad would trounce me every time. He would never let me win, not once. Ever. And my dad was the junior champion of Berlin before the war started. So not only did he trounce me, but then he would make fun of me when he did it. But let me tell you something. I retired a winner because I beat him about 3 weeks before my bar mitzvah, and I never played chess again. To this day. So there, I win and you're dead. I'm joking. My dad was an amazing man. But that's the thing, right? Like, so this is the thing. You don't get better by playing with people you beat. My shortcomings don't get better when they're easy, right? I'm going to quote a book that's not conference-approved literature, but I like it. It's called Drop the Rock, right? And it asks the question, is there a fast track to spiritual enlightenment? We need to be careful about making removal of character defects our number one priority, because that keeps us not living life on life's terms. If my entire focus is on how not to have these character defects, I'm living in projections of who I could possibly be in the future. And that's not living in the world. You understand? Yeah. It's like a trap, man. It's a trap. So this is the deal. I learn in the 5th step the things that cause me stress and trauma. Those are the things I don't want to be, right? Which gives me insight into the possibility of who I could be, right? But I can't practice being who I could be because that person doesn't exist yet. And if I try to be, it's a fantasy, and it's just me projecting into the future again. Which means the best I can do is practice not being who I was. And that way, I allow myself to evolve into who I can be. Now, that's some shit. I didn't want to drop the actual mic, right? But that's the whole idea. Why would I project fantasizing about who I can be? That person doesn't exist. The person that did, right? The person that was replete with defects because he didn't know doesn't exist anymore. Now, the person I am now knows he has shortcomings. So I engage the practice of not living in them. Right? I might have been prone to criminal behavior once or 40 times in my life. Just saying. Which means, like most people that live on the peripheral of law-abiding citizenry, denial and lying was part of my genetic makeup. It would suffice it to say it was almost my default setting. Right? So I come to AA and I read the 12th step. Would you read it for me? Please. It's right there on the wall.
Having had a spiritual awakening as a result.
As what?
As the result.
Thank you.
Of these steps. We try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
These principles. These. The implication is that there's a list. Listen, I've been in a lot of meeting rooms where they have those things. Step 1 is surrender. Step 2 is... Yeah, whatever. That's cute, but somebody made that shit up. Because nowhere in conference-approved literature is there a list of what the principle is for each step. And people say, well, the steps are the principles. Okay, well, the steps are principled, and that's what you have to live in to develop principles. But I think it's a valid argument to say that the steps are not actually the principles of the program. What are the principles of the program? They're not codified anywhere. I'll tell you the secret. You ready? They are the exact opposite of the defects you possess. They are individual to each and every person, which means I'm a bit of a liar. And I get sober and I get into step 6 and I do my 4th and 5th and I become enlightened about my problems and I don't want to live in those things and I have a desire to be a better man and I face these as defects and I ask for their relief. I cannot immediately become an honest person because that person doesn't exist yet. So what do? I immediately clean up the lies that I tell. And trust me, I said this shit for 2 years. My sponsor was up my butt about this. I would go to a meeting. I had a men's stag. My home group was a men's stag in LA. It was called Mario's. It was at a restaurant. It was an outlaw meeting. It wasn't in the book. And it would be a bunch of guys hanging out. Hey, did you watch the 49er game yesterday? Oh, dude, I did. It was so awesome. I didn't watch the game. I'm just so pathetic. I wanted you to talk to me for 3 more seconds because I'm lonely and nobody likes me and I'm 5. So I would lie. And then during the meeting, I'd be looking at that guy going, I can't believe I fucking lied about the goddamn... And then my sponsor would be like, what did I tell you to do? I'm like, oh, God, you're in my head and you're not even here. And I would go up to the guy after the meeting and I'd be like, dude, I lied to you about that. I don't even know why. I'm sorry. I have no idea. And I said that shit 20, 30 times a day to almost everybody I met. Bro, I just totally lied to you. I don't even know why. I'm sorry. Dude, I don't even know. Sorry. Right? And at first I was embarrassed. I thought people were going to not like me. But trust me, somebody tells you to lie to you and then they say they don't know why, you're just like, okay. Like, how are you going to be mad at them? You can't, right? So what happened was I would lie and I would fix it. And then I would lie without even thinking about it and I would fix it. And I would lie and I would fix it and I'd lie and I'd fix it, I'd lie and I'd fix it, I'd lie and I'd fix it. And the fix got closer and closer to the lie. Until one day, the fix jumped in front of the lie in my head. And all of a sudden, I went from correcting my shortcoming to living in my principle. And without even knowing about it, I became an honest man. Do you understand? I can't be the honest man if that shit is a mystery. I can just stop being the liar. That's the beauty of this step. Right? Like, this is serious, man. Like, this is life-changing. This thing, I'm like having the vapors. I'm getting misty. My wife's a southerner. I'm having the vapors. I'm seriously getting misty, right? Like, this is the beauty, right? Because we go on to step 7, and the first question is, what is our real purpose? I'm going to talk about that next week. Teaser. Because we got to look at the very last paragraph in step 5 in the 12 and 12, right? We got to look at that on page 62, right? What's that last paragraph? Let me open that up. I know it by heart, but I don't want to misquote it. The feeling of being one with God and man. This is after I've completed that 5th step. I start to understand my own delusions, my pathologies of lies, right? The nonsense, the bullshit I believe that makes me miserable. I come and I emerge from isolation. I'm no longer alone, right? Through open and honest sharing of this terrible burden of guilt, and I would add shame, which now starts to be like broken off, like chiseled off. The shame chisels off. Because guilt is good. Keeps you from not doing the bad shit. Shame is bad. Makes you feel who you are. Right? I lose this terrible burden of guilt and brings me to the resting place where I can prepare myself for the following steps to a full and meaningful life. It doesn't say that I become the person who is full and meaningful. I prepare myself for those steps. And the step means don't try to be full and meaningful. Try not to be a dick. That's it. It's kind of that simple. That's the beauty of the whole thing, right? Okay, let's see. I got a couple of notes. I just jot things down so I don't ramble. I try to stay in order. Okay? And so this is inherently what separates the men from the boys, the girls from the women, the children from the adults. Understanding that I will never be perfect in my eyes because my expectations have always been out of control. They've always been lopsided and they've always been self-defeating. However, I have to understand. Remember we talked about the fear pathology in step 4? That if I'm not good enough, then no one will love me. And if nobody loves me, I'll be alone. And if I'm alone, I'll have emotional pain. And if I have emotional pain, I'll drink. And the reason I'm afraid of that is because I'm afraid of death and the unknown, because I don't believe that there's God. And if there's no God, I have to be self-reliant. And self-reliance always fails me and makes me feel shame-based again. Right? If I learn from that, and I take it into my 5th step that God loves me enough because I'm not freaking dead, right? That I have value and purpose even yet to be discovered in this life, that my potentiality. Listen, I used to get so pissed when my mom would say, but you have such potential. Like, is that why you sat Shiva for me when I went to the penitentiary? Because I have potential? People are like, I thought you were dead. I brought a kugel. I don't know. Weird things happen, right? But now when somebody tells me that, I'm really stoked by the whole thing, right? I'm like, it's awesome. Because that potential is what I can be. But I don't try to be it because I allow myself, with the help of my higher power, to evolve into that person. I do that by concentrating on not being who I've been. That's the beauty, right? And right, let's look at page 68, because there's another line in here that I love a lot, right, in the 12 and 12, right? And it starts at the beginning. It says, if they construct a list of still milder defects, they will be obliged to admit that they prefer to hang on to some of them. Which means I don't find them objectionable. They're not going anywhere. If I came down here and started poking you with a pen, would you tell me to stop? Why? Correct, because it's freaking objectionable. A 3-year-old gets that. But basically, our life is this. I don't understand. Stop! Why am I not stopping? Over and over, I do it to myself constantly, and for years. I'm a bit of an idiot. And I just broke my pen. Right? Right? So, this practice, right? So, he talks about this, right? If we would gain any real advantage in the use of this step on our problems other than alcohol, which, by the way, is exactly what this step is for. It's got shit all to do with alcohol. It's all about problems other than that. That's what this step is about, right? Because we're about to launch into 7, which, by the way, is the close of 3, if you didn't know. And we'll talk about that next week, right? And then we get into ready to do 8. And 8 is when things actually change. What does it say on page 80 in the 12 and 12? Defective relationships with other human beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, including our alcoholism, which means you don't have shitty relationships because you're a drunk. You're a drunk because you do not know how to have a real relationship, and you never have. That's why I'm a drunk, guaranteed. The only relationship I ever had that was worth the shit and never faltered was with heroin and tequila. End of story, right? So if we would use this and gain real advantage on problems other than alcohol, we shall need to make a brand new venture into open-mindedness. We shall need to raise our eyes towards perfection, knowing we can never attain it, but still having that goal in mind, right? And be ready to walk in that direction. You know, on page 164 where it says, we trudge the road to happy destiny. Everybody thinks that's a negative connotation. Huh? It does, but it doesn't. But it's not, right? It's not. Trudging means to walk with determination and purpose. And trust me, I got that shit now because I don't want to be the person I was. And that's what motivates me all the time. Because even though I was a self-hating narcissist, there was a part of me that had overblown ego. Listen, who here has ever had a low tire that's like low on air? Okay. And of course, we all have. And so you drive into the Shell station. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Good looking out. So you drive into the Shell station. Oh, shit! So you drive into the Shell station, right?
You said trudging is walking with determination and something else?
And purpose.
And purpose.
I like Michelle. She's on point. She's taking notes. She knows what's up. So here's the deal. So you take that low tire and you drive it into the Shell station or the Chevron or the Marathon or BP or wherever you go. And you look and you're like, I need to put air in that tire. So you go to the machine and you look at the side of the tire. And the side of the tire says 42 pounds per square inch max. How much did you put in? Yes, you do. Because you're an alcoholic. You put 45 in. Because that's your freaking ego. It is deflated. And in your mind, if you just add a little bit extra for a cushion, you're going to be okay. But the problem is when you add that more, it goes beyond the safe area, you make the thing worse and it leaks quicker. Welcome to the alcoholic ego. Were you keeping track? Somebody's got to regulate me because I am not trustworthy. And the people who live in my head have really weird ideas. So, okay. If I work on finding things objectionable, I move to a place of being happy. And in that place, I can grow and evolve into the man I can be. Instead of obsessing about what I want, I become grateful about what I have. Thank you.